Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me to the panel. I hope we'll have some really nice discussions afterwards. And then Royal Greenland, to those of you who don't know it, we're owned by the Greenlandic government. We have annual revenues of around 5 billion Danish kroners, a bit more than 2,000 employees, of which 1,200, or a bit more than 1,200 here in Greenland. We operate 37 factories in as many different towns and villages in Greenland, 5 in Newfoundland, 1 in Quebec, and a couple in Western Europe. We also own and operate 6 factory trawlers and a fleet of large and small inshore vessels. So although not all of it is actually in the Arctic, it's certainly all in the north. And I think what is probably important to understand is that this is not subsistence fishing based on traditional methods. It might very well be how it started, but this is very much industrial now. We compete directly on world markets with companies which are not owned by traditional cultures. Our main species are shrimp, Greenland halibut, crab, cod, but basically we buy and process anything sold to us last year by 1,658 Greenlandic fishermen, small independent ones, and several hundred in Canada. Our main markets are Germany, UK, Scandinavia, Japan, and China. And in Japan and China, we actually sell more than 500 million Danish kroners worth every year, all through our own sales subsidiaries. We just made a significant acquisition in Canada, which will add the United States to our list of main markets. The main point being that some of which might have been true 50 years ago is now very different. Last year, our total volumes of fish and shrimp sold was about 100,000 tons. And even though Greenlandic people like to eat fish, it's probably fair to say that for every kilo eaten in Greenland, we sold at least 100 or several hundred kilos abroad. And it's important to understand some of these changes, so one does not just extrapolate from how things were, and then we think, this is just the same, but bigger. I haven't brought a presentation, but I brought 3 subjects that I hope we'll be able to discuss in the panel afterwards. And because it's late and some of us look a bit drowsy already, I will phrase these subjects a little bit more black and white perhaps than what I feel, but this will make it easier for discussion. So subject number 1, or statement number 1, is that fisheries must be managed in accordance with formal and preferably certified management plans. This is the same everywhere in the world. If fisheries are unmanaged or uncontrolled, the resources will be overfished. Sometimes it is assumed that in traditional cultures this is different. In my experience, that is not the case. It's more a reflection of Western romanticism. And we think, there were good old days when human beings were less evil than what we are today. I think, in fact, human beings are exactly the same everywhere, whether in China, Mexico, Greenland, or Germany, or Canada, or Norway, or Iceland. We are a highly successful predator, and we will outcompete any other species around. I think one of the main reason that we think that in the good old days there were different cultures that were consciously sustainable is that the human population was tiny. And our hunting methods or fishing methods were much less efficient than what you will see on a factory trawler today. So my first statement is that management plans and adherence to management plans are mandatory in the Arctic as much as everywhere else in the world. The second statement is that the political framework around fisheries must be based on informed, long-term, and basically consensual visions. The discussions about fisheries must be transparent, they must be non-confrontational, and there must be room for nuance, as the French would say. Now, in some parts of the Arctic, including Greenland, fisheries are tremendously important. Fish and shrimp generate somewhere between 90–95% of all export income of Greenland. So it is obvious that there is a big interest in it, or in them. Now, I'll give you one example. I said we operate 37 factories in as many towns and villages, and some of our competitors probably operate, let's say, 7 or 8 factories in places where we are not. So there's about 45 different towns and villages in Greenland that has its own factory. If you have your own fish factory, you can have your own fishing fleet in that place, and people can actually live there. If there is no factory, there will be no fishermen and there will be no people living there. And there is a strong and very legitimate wish across parties in Greenland, as in many places in the north, that people should be able to live in small communities. At the same time, if we compare the efficiency and the productivity of using factory trawlers with the efficiency given the difficult infrastructure of small land-based factories, the factory trawlers are much more efficient. So if we were just to optimize financially, and we contribute greatly to the Greenlandic state through dividends, through taxes paid, through licensing fees and so on. If we were just to optimize that, there should be more offshore fishing methods. If, on the other hand, we want to protect coastal communities, there should be more inshore fishing. Now, so which one to choose? My father said always, when I was young, I had very strong and simple opinions, as many teenagers do. And my father always said, Michael, on this subject, please remember there might be more than one intelligent opinion. And this is exactly one of those cases. This needs to be debated based on facts, based on transparent expression of what are the wishes, and understanding that you can't always get everything. You make choices. Now, sadly, the world is not really favoring informed long-term consensual visions or non-confrontational discussions. From South America to North America, from Western Europe to Eastern Europe, and even, I'm sure, somewhere in the Arctic, I mean, the world belongs to populists. Simple solutions and simple slogans that do more damage than good. I would hope, we could hope, that the Arctic communities, with our small populations and shared challenges and opportunities, could be the first to turn our back to slogan-based politics and actually look into more long-term visions consensually. My third and last point is that the single greatest challenge to the Arctic fisheries, and I would say northern fisheries, because the same is true in Far East Russia, same is true in Murmansk, it's true in North America, in Greenland, northern Norway, possibly not in Iceland, is the lack of human resources at all levels. We already today, we lack blue-collar workers, foremen, machinists, captains, IT people, business controllers, and sometimes even CEOs. If we look forward, this is not going to get any better. We strive very hard to maximize the amount of processing done within Greenland, just as you just explained with the reindeer. This requires more resources, and if we look at the populations are small and there are relatively low levels of education. This is exacerbated by net immigration, which means that the population, not just in Greenland, but many northern societies, is declining. Now, part of this is due to a mega trend, urbanization. That's really difficult to do anything about this. You'll see it in farming communities all over Europe and America also. So what can we do about this? Well, obviously, as we said in the previous session, education, education, education. We have many Faroese officers on our ships, and this is not liked very well in Greenland. But the truth is that the alternative in some cases would be that there would be no ships. We have to import labor from outside, and then it's good we do it from another northern country, obviously. But there is something we can do to fight what comes on top of the global trend of urbanization. And this is to make the Arctic a better place to live, not just a better place to visit as a tourist or as an NGO. This has something to do with jobs and opportunities, but it's also to look in the mirror, and several of the speakers did this before, and to say this is a harsh place to start with. but we make it worse by very high rates of violence, not least against women, by abuse of alcohol, drugs, and children, and by horrendous rates of murder and suicide. So if you're a young woman, and if you have kids, or you're looking forward to get kids, do you think you would consider, maybe I should leave this place and go to somewhere where there's greater physical safety for myself and my kids? I would, and many women do. My hope is that we could bring this down to just European average levels, so that the company I work for also has access to competent staff in 10, 20, and 50 years. Thank you.